Okay, well, welcome to this presentation on block mode to web with Rapide, which is the fourth in our series of web seminars on Rapide. For the agenda, firstly, background to why you might want to consider moving off block mode to the web. Secondly, a look at the Rapide Block Mode Option, and then we'll have a demonstration of taking an existing model, which is the CAGen sample model that you may be familiar with, and moving it onto the web. What are the reasons why you might want to move from block mode? Well, the reason you're still using block mode would typically be because the application is fundamentally meeting the business needs, and as a technology it can be fast and efficient, but really only for experienced users, people who are familiar with block mode applications. And new users are often much more familiar with web and with Windows applications, less so with the mainframe. So training new users can be a constraint. There's also a difficulty in what you can fit into 24 by 80 screens, and that can mean that a lot of the information has to be codified, and that places an additional burden on new users to understand a lot of business codes because you haven't got room on those screens to fit in a lot of descriptive text. Some of our customers are looking to move off the mainframe to distributed platforms, and the AEF client doesn't provide a fantastic emulator for the mainframe compared with mainframe terminal emulators, so that's often not viewed as a forward step, even if you are getting off the mainframe. The block mode application may have a lot of business logic embedded within it, but it can be difficult to access that business logic except through the screens that you've built. And many of the users in your shop will have a mix of web applications and block mode, and having to switch between them can again be quite disruptive and inefficient. So ultimately, it can end up being a case of improving user satisfaction, as well as some other business benefits like being able to expose some of the functionality in your block mode applications to web services and to provide a much easier way of accessing that data. Some of the options that you have to move off a block mode, well, firstly, you can use web terminal emulators, but essentially they don't fundamentally change the user interface, maybe beyond a few basic control enhancements. And because you're not fundamentally changing your gen model, you're just providing a different way of accessing the same 3270 transactions, you cannot easily extend the functionality to provide a better user interface. The second option is a complete redevelopment of the application in some other technology, and essentially that can be very expensive, risky, and difficult to justify. And let's face it, the reason you're still using your block mode applications is because they do what you want them to do. So to have an expensive project to redevelop the front end, which maybe doesn't fundamentally change what the application does, is a difficult business case to make. The third option that's been around in Gen for many years is the ability to generate or transform the screen design into a GUI or web. And essentially what you do there is you take your 3270 screen designs, and the Gen tool will create a first cut web GUI interface for them. But there are quite a few areas of 3270 screen design that are not supported in Gen GUI. For example, editable group views, if a group view spans more than one line, if you use IEF scrolling, if you have command entry or make use of nextran, you've got to decide what you're going to do with your PF key assignments. If you split it into client and server, you've got a problem with your make statements, because the make statements operating on the server will not affect the fields on the client. And you have to convert all of your screens. It's an all or nothing conversion. And again, as a project, that can end up with quite a lot of work and be difficult to justify, even if you can automate a large part of it. So those were the reasons why we decided to take a fresh look at what could be done to help block mode applications move to the web, and we took looked again at what are the difficulties, what do we need to support, and the objectives we set ourselves with the Rapide Block Mode option were to provide an easy approach to transform existing Gen block mode screens to a web or even a mobile user interface, whilst providing a very low cost, low risk, fast transformation with minimal changes to the model and also minimal changes to the way that you currently develop your applications. That would then lead to improved user productivity and also enable you to make a phased transition of your applications from a block mode style interface to a more of a web GUI interface, but based on business benefits. And also make it easier to accomplish platform change. So if you want to move off the mainframe and provide a web interface to the application, then that can be done far more easily with the Rapide approach. The way that the Rapide Block Mode option works is we start with the existing 3270 screen design in your model. We provide some automated enhancement of the UI controls. We also provide an optional automated conversion to a GUI design and an optional conversion to a cooperative client-server approach as well. So with this 3270 screen design, with Rapide we put in full support for a lot of the Gen screen features that are not supported by Gen GUI. For example, an editable command field, use of the set next trend, editable group views, scrolling of repeating group views or even single row group views, support for push buttons to replace function keys or menus to replace function keys, support for make statements, and also some support for hiding some of the things that you probably wouldn't want on a web interface, like some of the screen templates, literals and commands that are no longer appropriate, and that can again be highly automated, so you're not having to make changes to thousands of screens individually. Some of the control enhancements we can put in are things like tooltips, mandatory indicators, replacing standard entry fields with checkboxes, drop-downs, list boxes, date time pickers, support for accelerator keys, for CSS styling if you want to improve the look and feel or make it a corporate look and feel of the application. For conversion to a GUI interface, you can also convert the 3270 design to a GUI design using our plugin, and with our converter it's very faithful to the screen design, so that the resulting GUI design looks identical to the screen design, and if you were to take the existing screen design and generate it as a GUI with Rapide or convert it to a GUI and then generate it, they're identical, so it's very faithful representation. The advantage of converting to a GUI is it forms the foundation for future enhancements beyond those that you could essentially that you couldn't do in the screen design. So for example, if you had a personnel application and you wanted to put a picture of the person on the window, then you can't place a blob image into a screen design, but you can with Rapide place a blob image onto a GUI design. So that particular screen could be converted to a GUI to allow you to place a blob image on the screen. But the big benefit of doing it with Rapide is you can mix and match. If you have 1,000 screens and you want to enhance 5 of them, then you only need to convert those 5 to a GUI design and enhance them, and they will interoperate with the other procedure steps that still retain the screen design. So this mix and match approach means that you only need to enhance those screens where there's a business benefit for doing so, and the others you can retain unchanged. For packaging, there are 2 options for packaging a block mode application with Rapide. One is to use window packaging, which you might sometimes call fat client, and the other is to use cooperative packaging, which may be sometimes called thin client. For fat client, the 3270 procedure step remains unchanged. So the screen, the procedure step, and the action diagram logic are unchanged, and Rapide generates a web interface using the screen design. So the only thing that's changed is that the procedure step is packaged into a window load module, and that's it. With the Fat Client approach, then you can retain the existing online packaging. You generate the code for Java because it's running as a web application on an application server, and the database calls would use JDBC. So the advantage of this approach is there are no model changes. It's very quick, and essentially the developer process remains largely unchanged. The main disadvantages are that because you're moving to a Java platform, then your external action blocks would need to be rewritten in Java, or if you use the Rapide EAB proxy, they could be written in C. But if you're moving an application off the mainframe where the current external action blocks are in COBOL, then they would need to be rewritten. And the server code is now executing on the application server, so it's running in Java. It could still be Java on the mainframe, of course, but it's not COBOL anymore. The alternative is to split the procedure step into two, one half called the client and the other half called the server. So the user interface remains the same, but the 3270 procedure step is split into a client and a server. This is automated using the Rapide Designer again, and we'll take a look at that in the demo. The client contains the screen, the dialog flows, and a p-step use of the server, and is again generated for Java. And the server contains all of the business logic that was previously in the 3270 screen procedure step, and that's unchanged apart from the removal of the screen. And that server can be generated for any of the supported Gen platforms, so C, COBOL, EJB, etc. One of the traditional disadvantages of splitting between client and server is that you need to decide how to handle make statements, because if the make statements execute on the server, they will not actually affect the fields in the client p-step because the makes are not transferred in the client server return flow. Well, we have support for this. We have the ability with Rapide to bring the make data from the server back to the client and apply it on the client so that the make statements can still execute on the server and then affect the relevant windows on the client, fields on the client windows. So the advantage of splitting into a cooperative server is potentially you don't need to change your external action blocks because they're still executing on the same server platform that your 3270 applications are running on. And actually you don't even need to regenerate any of your server action blocks or RI triggers. They remain completely unaffected by this. The main disadvantage of cooperative is that you can no longer generate a block mode interface, because the conversion uses a p-step use from the client to the server, and the standard Gen 3270 runtime doesn't support a p-step use. So as long as you are doing a conversion to the web, maybe on a separate model, then this would work fine. So the benefits of the block mode option: it's a fast, low cost, low risk transition from block mode to the web, targeted at significantly improving user productivity and ease of use of the application. And then once you're on the web platform, then you have the full power of Rapide and Gen GUI to target incremental enhancements to your application to improve and extend the application beyond what you could previously achieve with a block mode application. Obviously, if you don't need any of that and you purely want to move the platform, then it's a very quick transition and you're up and running within days, really. So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at taking the Gen sample model and moving it to the web. I'm going to start off by showing you the Gen sample model. This is running locally on my machine using AEFC, but it could equally well be using a mainframe terminal emulator. So if you're familiar with the sample model, you'll have seen that you have three options for divisions, departments, and employees. And if I just choose option 3 for employee maintenance, here you have a list of employees, And notice here how this is an editable group view. So I have a repeating group view, and I could add a new row and add in a new employee. And so there I've added the new employee, and then I can go back to the menu, and so that's the 3270 application. So in the model there is the screen design for the employee detail, and what I want to do is take that entire application and generate it for the web. So the first thing I need to do with Rapide is set up what we call a block mode template. So I've got one here that I added into the model through migrating it from our sample model, and essentially the block mode template has an area where the 3270 screen fields will be placed, and that's the screen area. It has another area where the function keys will be placed, and you can move these around, put them wherever you want. It has a message area at the bottom, and it has optionally a menu structure, and this contains all of the commands that might be on your application. So I want to add, edit and delete under the edit menu, and file, open, menu, exit under the file menu, and a go-to menu. So these are all the possible commands that you might want to have, and that's in the template. So to convert this to the web, what I need to do is firstly launch the Rapide Designer, and I need to set up firstly my block mode defaults, and that's where I say what my template is. I also specify what my function keys are, so I'm going to say my enter key, I'm going to have some user-friendly text to process, and my menu key, I'm going to have a tooltip return to menu, and my F12 key is going to be called previous screen. So I'm just providing some user-friendly text instead of the command. So instead of seeing a command of return, you see previous screen, and instead of seeing command of uppercase process, you see lowercase process, and you can control this. And then in my defaults I have prev, next, and menu and help, which I don't want to see at all, so I've said that those are hidden. So this is very much a one-off task for the business system. I can also say that, for example, I don't want my screen templates. So if we looked at the 3270 screen design, we have tran code and date time and a PF key line and an error key line in my template, and I don't want to see those because I don't need to see the tran code for a GUI application. So I'm going to say don't include the template. The only other task is to do some window packaging, and to do that I'm going to pick my procedure steps, and I'm going to package them into a window load module. Now you could do this with the gen packaging tool, but the nice thing about the Rapide plugin is it'll do it all in one go. So I can pick all of my procedure steps, it will generate me some default window tran codes using my settings, and essentially that's saying I want my window load module to be W plus the first 7 characters of my online load module, and my tran code to be W plus the first 7 characters of my online tran code. So you have these rules, and that's what it uses to generate, and then I'm going to update that, and that's done the window packaging for me. So if I now bring up my generation options and bring up window generation, window code generation, there is my window manager that was just generated, and what I need to do now is set my generation defaults to generate for Java, which I've already done, and then basically I generate my procedure steps and action blocks for Java. So I'll do that. So this is the standard CA-Gen generators, generating the action diagram code for Java. And then when I've done that, I launch the Rapide generator. And what I need to do is take my load module and package it into a Rapide application, which I'll call sample. And the final thing I need to do is say, what is my entry point? How do I get into my application? Well, that's through the menu. So I'll give it an entry point of menu. And you'll notice here that we have this little red indicator to say that's our entry point. And having done that, I can generate, build, and assemble my application. So let's do that. So we're now generating the Rapide control files. It's now building the application, which is compiling. It's now assembling the application. And now that's ready to go. So a quick way of testing is just to double click on the entry point, which is the menu. And here we are. There's the same application built with Rapide. So I can make this a bit smaller. So I can choose option 3, and I can notice editable group views, something you can't do in standard Gen GUI. And here is my application working exactly the same way, except that what I have is a menu structure, and each of the commands becomes a push button, and notice the help text. Okay, so that's a fairly simple, that's the application running, and if you're happy with that, that's all you need to do. So the application has been converted in a few minutes. What I wanted to also do is show you how you can improve the application very easily. So I'm going to close the Rapide generator, and in my screen I've got various fields like a date field, a pay type, which is a codified field, full time, it's a codified field. And rather than having these codified fields, I want to make them more user-friendly. So I'm going to launch the Rapide Designer again. I'm going to look at the employee detail, and I'm going to make some enhancements. So I'm going to say that the service date, I don't want a standard date field, I want a date picker, which could be null. My full-time status, instead of YN, I want that to be a checkbox. So when it's on, it's value Y. When it's off, it's value N. My pay type, I want to be a drop-down. And instead of these codes H, M, S, W, it's automatically got me the permitted values. And now I can put in some more friendly text. So there's some more friendly text for the drop downs. Maybe my employee name, I want that to be a mandatory field, and I want to put in a hint how they should put it in. So they should enter it as first name, last name, and a help tooltip here. Okay, so there I'm putting in a tooltip as well. So these are all put into the Rapide Designer. So now what I can do is go back to the Rapide generator and regenerate that one screen. And if I rerun the application and add a new employee, you'll see here that because I haven't yet provided the name, the mandatory indicator appears. I've got the tooltip. I've got the hint. I've got the checkbox, the date with a date control, and the pay type with a much more user-friendly drop-down. What I've also got here is some selection fields, so I can put an S and press select to bring up the department and division. So that's adding those in that way. But again, those aren't particularly user-friendly ways of doing things. So this might be a screen I want to convert to a GUI to provide some push buttons there, make it much more user-friendly. So let's take a look at that. So what I want to do now is take it one stage further. I could stop at this point, and this is a perfectly usable application on the web. But I just want to show you some further possibilities. So what I'm going to do is bring up the Rapide Designer, and I'm going to take my entire application and I'm going to convert it to client server. So I'm going to split each of those procedure steps into two. Okay, so I've selected my procedure steps and I'm now converting them from a single mainframe procedure step into separate client and server procedure steps. Okay, that's done. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to convert from a screen design to a Windows GUI. Now at this point we have some further options. What we can do with the screen to GUI transformation is we can convert a selection character. So wherever I have an IF supplied selection character in a list box, I'm going to make that automatically a GUI selection character. We'll take a look at that when we actually run the application. And similarly, if I have any fields, in this case from a work set called selection and an attribute prompt, I'm going to convert that to a selection push button. And that it was an example in the screen design. I'll show you that in a minute. That was an example where we had the S and to select a prompt field. We're going to convert those automatically to push buttons. So I'm now going to transform, and what this tool is doing is converting the screen design to a GUI, and it retains the screen design, but if you're happy with it you can actually delete the screens once you're finished. So now if I take a look at the employee detail, my screen design is still there, and this button was where I put an S in to select the department. And if I go to the GUI design, that's being generated for me by Rapide with a push button to select the division or the push button to select the department. So if we take a look at that now, if I go to the generation options and bring up cooperative code, you'll see we have our server and our window manager that were created by the plugin. So the first thing I need to do is generate my server, because this is the first time I've done it. So I'm going to generate my server for Windows Oracle CIFAE. So I'm going to generate and install my server code. And this is using the standard Windows build tool, CAGen build tool for Windows. This is a standard CAGen server, so this could be a CICS server or on Windows, or it could be on EJBs. Any standard CAGen server. This has nothing to do with Rapide, standard CAGen. So there's my server, and I'm going to start the transaction enabler so that I can call the server. And then I need to generate my client code. So for my client environment, I'm going to generate that for Java. And I'm generating my Java code. And then I go back into the Rapide generator, and this time I'm using cooperative packaging. So there is my cooperative load module, which I'm going to package into an application. I'll call it Wrap Cooperative. And now I'm going to generate, build, and assemble that. So this is now the cooperative client server version. And then I'm ready to retest that, and you'll see it looks the same for the screens I haven't changed, but for the screen that I enhanced, I now have these push buttons where I can pick. Notice now I don't need to put an S in there, it's hidden the selection and it's made it much more like a GUI. So I just pick a row and it's much more user friendly. And if we go back to the Gen model, just look at the dialog flows, what's happened now is if I look at the, for example, employee detail, that is now turned into automatically a client which calls the server, plus a couple of events to support the selection push button, and on the server we have the code that was previously in the 3270 transaction, but it's non-screen, so it can run as a cooperative server transaction. There's no screen there. So that concludes the quick demo to show you the possibilities. This is the fourth in our series of Rapide seminars, all of which are available as recordings. And then in a few weeks' time, we're running a series of seminars on model management, tracing on the mainframe, code and quality checking, and code coverage testing. So hopefully you can join us for those. So thank you very much for attending.